Welcome back to the Dean Obeidallah Show. Joining us now, our friend Jill Wine-Banks, former Watergate prosecutor, an amazing legal analyst, and co-host of hashtag Sister-in-Law's podcast, which you check out. It's very popular. Jill, thanks for joining us, my friend. A huge breaking news today. First of all, before I give you any of my views, what is your view on the Supreme Court 6-3 decision saying point blank the International Emergency Economic Powers Act does not authorize the president to impose these tariffs?
I think, first of all, that it is much bigger than tariffs. It's not just tariffs or the specific tariffs he imposed. It's about presidential power and the accretion of power that the Constitution and the laws don't give him. It's also about the power of Congress and the power of the court, because one of his arguments is the Supreme Court can't even review what I do in this. And I think that may have redounded to the benefit of the plaintiffs in this case, where the court said, yeah, we have the power, we do review, and we're going to do it. The only disappointment I have is it was 6-3. It should have been 9-0.
Yep.
There's no way this is a case that could have possibly been decided in his favor.
I couldn't agree with you more. A 9-0. I was just telling my fiance that before. It meant nothing.
Oh, congratulations. I didn't know about that.
Well, we lived together for 15 years. She's my fiance.
Okay, well, all right. That's a long time.
It's right, right. It's not a bit. But the point is that in the famous Watergate case, 9-0, right? There are times the court should put things behind them. There's nothing in the statute that allows a president to impose tariffs. Zero. It does not exist. Every court that ruled on this before ruled against Trump. This is not even a close one. For those three, Alito, Thomas, and Kavanaugh, especially Kavanaugh, what a disappointment, a guy who I thought actually cared about the Constitution. So when you say this is bigger and this is about presidential power, can you go a little deeper into that? Why does this resonate with you as being about presidential power?
Sure. Well, but first I have to correct you because it was actually an 8-0 in the
8-0. Okay.
Because we used to have justices that recused themselves when they had a conflict of interest. And one justice had been in the Nixon administration in the Office of Legal Counsel, so he did not decide. So it was a unanimous decision.
Right.
And there weren't 7 different opinions as there is in this case, where you have multiple concurrences, you have a majority, you have a plurality, and 2 dissents. So it's quite a lot to take in. This is bigger because it basically looks at presidential power. And Trump is arguing that he has unlimited power to do anything he wants. And the court is saying, well, number one, we have to look at the words of the statute. And it doesn't say anything about taxes or tariffs. It says regulate. And that doesn't mean the same thing. And so we're going to stick with the text of the statute. And you can't ignore that. It also, there is this plurality of 3 that looks at major questions doctrine, which interestingly has never been used, of course, against Donald Trump by this court. It has been used against Biden, but really against administrative agencies that Biden had doing things. And it has been used against administrative agencies in a way that would support Trump policies, that agencies can't do things within their jurisdiction unless it's specifically granted to them. And now they're saying the same is true to the president. If the Constitution doesn't give him a specific power and a statute doesn't, and especially using a statute that was actually intended to confine presidential powers, as IEPA was intended, are things that he can't do. Now, the case isn't over because, as you will probably agree, there are alternatives that he could use. And that was argued in the court. Even Neil Katyal said, yeah, there are possible other options, but this doesn't make this one legal. You can't do this one.
So, and let me get your view on that. So he already just imposed a 10% new tariff. But do you think this decision makes every trial court and appellate court that is going to review that, because there'll be lawsuits again right away, much tougher on the administration, and go like, look, the Supreme Court already said, we are reining you in. You've got that power by the Constitution or by statute. We're not implying any powers to you that are not in either place. So do you think that has an impact on the future court decisions?
Oh, I think it definitely will. And I hate to think of this in terms of Trump-appointed justices or judges and others. because it really is a question of the Constitution and of interpretation of the Constitution and statutes. So I think it will have an effect. I know we were hearing talk that he's going to use the 1974 Trade Act to impose, but that only allows him to do it for 15%, which some of these were higher, and for 150 days unless Congress agrees. So there's your risk. Will Congress give him that power? And Congress has certainly ceded a lot of its power. So you have to worry whether Congress will say, okay, you do that for 150 days, and then we'll say it's okay to extend it. It does limit it to 15%, which is somewhat of a relief, but it's not over yet. And so anyone who thinks that we can go back to business as usual and that small businesses are going to survive is wrong. I mean, the only way to write this is to change Congress and the president.
Well, and looking at this through a political lens, what Congress would have to do is, in essence, impose a tax increase in an election year. So if Republicans want to do that, as a Democrat, I can only be giddy at that prospect. And look, just so it's clear, Jill, the Supreme Court is not saying no one can impose these massive tariffs. They're saying Congress.
Yes.
It's their power. So if Congress wants to impose every single thing Trump has proposed, they can go do this biggest tax increase of our lifetimes right now, 6 months before an election. Go right ahead and do it.
And in the worst form possible, it's a sales tax that you will feel every single day. You go to the store to buy the toy your child wants, and it costs you a lot more. So yeah, there was even one commentator who said, you know, the Supreme Court has taken the matches away from the baby, and maybe they've done him a big favor because his tariffs are so unpopular that by getting rid of them just before the midterms, maybe they're actually helping him, and maybe it was deliberate. I don't think it was deliberate. I think it was a justified legal conclusion. But it is an interesting point of view that this would be a tax imposition hurting consumers just as we're going into midterms. And we've already seen Democrats taking control in so many races where you would be surprised that, you know, a Texas district that was so overwhelmingly Trump just elected a Democrat. So we're seeing the effect of the tariffs and other horrible policies.
And I'm sharing with our friend Jill Wine-Banks. I will say this, of knowing businesses, it's going to get hard to convince them to bring the price all the way down to the pre-tariff amount, because if consumers are buying it, they just love the free profit margin. So now Trump's got to start screaming at companies, we're going to do a windfall profit tax. He's not going to do that, but I'm just saying, but I want to get back.
Gosh.
I know we won't. I want to get back to the Supreme Court decision. I found it remarkable that the first of all, Chief Justice wrote this opinion. So that's already has a greater weight when a Chief Justice writes it. And he could have picked any words he wanted. And I love this part. He said, recognizing the taxing power's unique importance and having just fought a revolution motivated in large part by taxation without representation, the framers gave Congress alone access to the pockets of the people. And what I love, they cite the Federalist Papers, Hamilton and Madison, and it says paragraph 19 of the Declaration of Independence. And went back to the Declaration to see the grievance was for imposing taxes on us without our consent.
Yes.
This was invoking the DNA of this country, that a king imposing a tax on you without representation is this analogous what's going on. And he didn't have to pick that. The idea we just fought a revolution. I thought it was an amazing choice of words.
It is. And it's like good for the No King's March that's coming up. I mean, literally, no kings, no taxation without representation. That is makes the name No King's March so appropriate, and really should be a reminder to Democrats and Republicans and independents and libertarians that what is happening here is the creation of an authoritarian monarch at a time when King Charles is in trouble for the Epstein files now. And they're saying it could be his Watergate moment, because what did he know and when did he know it? They paid $14 million to Virginia Giuffre, and and then Starmer's in trouble because he appointed an ambassador who was connected. So, we're going backwards. And remember, the Trade Act of 74 was passed to control the government, to control Nixon in particular. So we have to look at all of that and say, we're in a good position because the Supreme Court did one right thing. Let's not think of them
I
as
know, right, right.
heroes. Let's say, okay, this is good, but let's look at all the other bad things they've done. If they hadn't given him immunity, we wouldn't be in this situation. I mean, there's just so many things they've done.
I agree. And in this first year, they've ruled for him a little bit over 90%. I don't know when you factor in this decision where it changes, if it brings it below 90%. But from just a legal point of view, that doesn't make sense other than you're doing what he wants. So this one they stood up to. What do you make of this conclusion? I thought it was interesting in the court. And again, it's not a long opinion in Roberts. All the other opinions add up to 130, 60, whatever.
163, I think.
Right. So the conclusion is we claim no special competence in matters of economics or foreign affairs. We claim only, as we must, the limited role assigned to us by Article 3 of the Constitution. Fulfilling that role, we hold that the statute does not authorize the president to impose tariffs. So they come back to this kind of like a humble thing here to the wannabe tyrant. And I think it was interesting. Why do they, I mean, every word is chosen for a reason. These are wordsmiths. Why did they get?
Yeah, I think that goes back to my point that they were like, you're trying to take away our power, saying we can't review this. We do have constitutional, that's what Title III gives us. We review your decisions. We are the thing that balances the power. We do separation of power and balancing power. So I think that is but it is a quiet way. It does raise the question of why did they let him continue the tariffs? Because, of course, the amount that has to be refunded, if anything, and that's a whole new discussion. But if anything has to be refunded, it's obviously greater than if they had stayed it when they first accepted the case and said you can't collect any more. There would have been less to repay. So I think that's a question we have to ask is what were they thinking when they did not grant the stay that was requested pending the arguments and decision?
So, and I want to touch on two things Trump said in his press conference afterwards, and I'll read the lines here. He said first he slammed the justices. He said he was ashamed of them, which you can say, but then he said this. He said, quote, they are very unpatriotic and disloyal to our Constitution. What do you make of that? A guy who attempted a coup, who was, convicted of 34 felonies for cheating in the 2016 campaign, accusing Supreme Court justices who ruled against him of being unpatriotic and disloyal, essentially treasonous.
It's a threat, not just to the court, but to the lower courts, which, as we've already said, you and I agree, this will impact the lower courts, and they will have to, as cases come up, rule in favor of plaintiffs challenging any potentially newly imposed tariffs. And so I think this is, his way of threatening, as he does everybody who doesn't agree with him. And the next thing you know, he's going to be demanding the Department of Justice impeach them or take action against members of the Supreme Court, as he has done with members of Congress and others who don't support his views. So it's unconscionable. It's unpresidential to be using language like that, but that's what we expect from Donald Trump. He always does that.
And he also said, and I'll read this line, and it's very jarring. I mean, it's in the middle of a press conference. He said, it's my opinion the court has been swayed by foreign interests, which sounds like what you're getting at. Try to lay the groundwork for potential DOJ investigations into Supreme Court justices.
Right. Exactly. I can't think of any other excuse. The language is unsupported by any fact, which never stops Trump from saying them. Facts should matter. That's why I have a show called Just the Facts, because I remember the days when facts actually mattered and bipartisanship existed so that Democrats and Republicans would have back then had a discussion and said, no, tariffs are hurting our country. Our exports, our imports, our manufacturing, it's all bad. Our consumers are in bad shape. We aren't going to let him do this. And if he does it under something that is an emergency power for 150 days, that's it. It's only going to be 150 days. We're going to stop it. So I don't think the threat will have any impact. I don't think there's anything much that he can do. Could he have someone start impeachment proceedings based on what? If anything, Thomas, let's remember how much money he's taken from people and the benefits he's had. Maybe he could be impeached. I don't think that's what Donald Trump has in mind, however.
No.
That was one of the three dissenters. He wrote the dissent. So it seems to be just the gibberish that he goes to his base, and that's all it is.
You worked as a prosecutor investigating Richard Nixon. Did he ever slam the court in this kind of language when the courts ruled against him?
No, ultimately, he believed in the rule of law. When they ruled against him, he obeyed. He fought through the courts. He did what you do as a defendant, and he, filed briefs and had the Department of Justice, the Solicitor General, arguing for him. But when the court said unanimously, turn over the tapes, and he didn't destroy them, which is another interesting thing. He turned them over, fully aware, I am sure, that it was the end of his presidency, because the tapes were so much damage of evidence, compelling evidence, that he had been part of a cover-up. And, the same thing is true here. The cover-up is worse than the crime, maybe. And he is in big trouble with this. I think that the courts are going to continue to say he can't use the powers that he's trying to use, and that he has only the powers that the Constitution gives him,
Mhm.
and that Congress specifically delegates to him, and they have not given him any taxation power, and tariffs are taxes. So I think this one is pretty much over, and that whatever threats he issues, they have a lifetime appointment, and impeachment, he's going to have to impeach, including the people he appointed. How is he going to justify that? So I don't think it's going to work. And he
He
can't
doesn't care.
impeach the
He has
entire
no
court.
loyalty. He has no loyalty. He'll start talking about expanding the Supreme Court, like Democrats have been talking about.
Yes.
But look, I think neither of us would be shocked if we hear Kash Patel has opened an investigation into one of the 6 Supreme Court justices. You can't. I mean, this is the nation we live in today, where the last check on his power, he has to do whatever he has to scare them or intimidate
Yeah.
them.
Well, I would say Congress could be a check on his power if
It could be.
Congress had any balls. They would be doing a statement of, we have the power to do certain things, and you cannot impound. I mean, not only do they have the right to appropriate money, but there's an impoundment law that they should be enforcing, and they're not. So there's the emoluments clause. There's no
Right.
teeth to that. Let's start passing laws that put some teeth to the emoluments clause. Let Congress start doing the protection of the American public and of really our foundation, our democracy, the 3 branches of government. We need some new laws, and Congress is the one who can do that, and they're not. But midterms are not that far off. And
Oh,
I think we're going to see the results in primary elections, but certainly in the midterms, I think we're going to see a big switch of both houses of Congress. I think even
I
the
hope so.
Senate is in danger now.
I'm sorry, with Jill Wine-Banks. Last question, let me ask you about the Epstein files as a former prosecutor. We have, DOJ says there's over 1,200 victims. We have victims who go to Congress and are clamoring for accountability. They went on Capitol Hill, they're clamoring for accountability. They are telling DOJ, in most cases, who abused them, or at least a description of the person, and they are willing to work with DOJ. And DOJ's response is, we're done. No investigations. Have you seen that as a prosecutor before, when you have all the elements to open an investigation and the prosecutor's like, nah, we've seen enough?
No, I mean, and that's why you're seeing the defections from the Department of Justice. How many assistant U.S. attorneys have resigned, and how many have been fired because they wouldn't do what they were ordered to do? We're now seeing courts holding in contempt members of the Department of Justice because they are unable to meet the needs. And they're saying, well, this job sucks. And that person was put on leave, of course. But others are just saying, I'm sorry, I misled you. I didn't have the information. I don't have the time. I'm a JAG officer. Let's think about what's happening. JAG officers are being assigned to be assistant U.S. attorneys. We are militarizing the Department of Justice. Think about what that means. This is so wrong. Remember, I was general counsel of the Army. I
Mhm.
respect JAG officers. I respect them. They do a good job. They are not trained to prosecute criminal cases. And they are used to following orders. They aren't supposed to follow orders when they're in the Department of Justice. They have to make decisions on ethical basis. Is this a prosecutable case? Is it one that I can get a conviction and sustain the conviction on appeal? And this is troubling to me in a major way, that we are having JAG officers appointed as immigration judges and
Yeah.
as prosecutors.
And very last thing, because people bring up John Mitchell all the time, that yes, an attorney general went to jail, but the difference was Trump will pardon Pam Bondi. We know that Nixon never pardoned John Mitchell. Is there a reason why he didn't pardon him?
It's a big mystery to me, because not only was it his attorney general, it was one of his only real friends. They
Oh,
practiced law together. They were together for a long time. And not just him, but why he didn't pardon everyone is sort of a surprise. And, why when Ford pardoned Nixon, did he think about pardoning the others who were in jail? And would he have distinguished between the attorney general, the chief of staff, the chief domestic, and the burglars who
right.
worked for CREEP, the committee to reelect the
Mhm.
president? I mean, it would have been complicated and bad,
Right.
but he took the hit. Ford took the hit for doing the one pardon. Why not do more? Why didn't, as his last act,
Yeah.
he announced his resignation. Why didn't he also say, and I'm pardoning everybody who was involved because we need to put this behind us? I don't know. I don't know.
Maybe it was a respect for the institutions right to the very end, while Trump has zero. But Trump will pardon. When Trump leaves, he's pardoning everybody. Everyone should know that. Everyone, whoever were, every ICE agent, CBP, and everything. Well, Jill, I want to thank you, my friend, for joining us on the big news day. And again, check out the podcast. It's Sister-in-Laws, the podcast. And there's another podcast, Just the Facts.
Just the facts. Yep.
All right, my friend. Thanks very much. Have a great weekend. Nice chatting
Thank
with you.
you.